Hello, welcome back to the COVID Wellness Support Program. In this session, we are going to be talking about unhelpful thinking. Specifically, we're going to take a look at the relationship between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We're going to talk about some common unhelpful thinking patterns. We're going to work on challenging some of these unhelpful thoughts that we may be having. And we're going to work on developing a skill to gain some distance from some of these troubling thoughts that we may be experiencing. So just to begin, we're actually going to play around with some optical illusions here just for a minute. So I'd encourage you to take a look at this first photo that comes up and take a look at what you initially see. And I'm going to give you a heads up that there's actually two different images within this one picture here. Play around with it for a minute and see if you can see the two different images. Now in this case, in case you can't see it, I'll try and help to outline it for you. So there's either the two black silhouettes of faces looking at one another on either side. So you're seeing essentially the peripheral side of these faces. Or you're going to see a white vase that's in the middle of the screen. See if you can see both now. And the next one we have here, take a look and see what you initially see in this image. And again, I'm going to let you know that there are two different images within this one. I'll give you another clue because this one can be trickier. The two images are of a young woman and an elderly woman. Now to help you maybe see both, if you have not already, the image of the young woman is she's looking away from you. She's got kind of a fancy hair piece that curls up at the front of her head and it flows off the back of her head, and she's wearing what looks like a big kind of wool coat or fur coat. Now the elderly woman still has the fur coat, but she's looking down and straight ahead of herself. And if you're able to see the younger woman, with the younger woman's outline of her face is actually the older woman's nose. And instead you'll see her hair, and she has kind of almost like what looks like a scarf that comes over her head like this. It's difficult to explain without being able to actually point at the picture. And I hope that if you haven't been able to see both, you spend some more time and maybe pause this video and see if you're able to see both images. But the point of looking at these images is to really showcase the fact that we don't often see things as they actually are. We see things as we are. And basically what this means is it really comes down to our perception of the way that we interpret and view things that makes it real to us. Okay? And this has a lot to do with the way that we think. And so if we revisit this cognitive behavioral model, we've talked about this in pieces before, but we're going to get a little bit more into detail with it here. So the cognitive behavioral model surrounds this concept that thoughts, feelings, or emotions and behavior are all interconnected, and this nice triangle diagram really showcases that. Now, one can influence the other and so on. So we'll often have a thought, and the thought that we have will also go along with an emotion, right? So let's say I say to you, we're going to have overcooked broccoli for dinner tonight, right? So we have that thought. Now, whether you maybe noticed it or not, right? An emotion that might come from that is kind of disgust, right? That overcooked broccoli, it's soggy, right? Unless you love it, you never know. Maybe you're really excited and really happy that we're having that for dinner tonight. But either way, there is an emotion that goes along with that. And that emotion can determine what our behavior is, right? So if you're someone like me who has no interest in eating that overcooked broccoli this evening, I might either delay dinner, I might not eat that for dinner tonight, I might try and maybe go somewhere else for dinner tonight. Alternatively, if you were someone that happened to be really excited about that concept, you might be really eager to get home for dinner tonight, right? So it actually modifies our behavior and so on. Okay? And they can influence each other, right? So if we change our behavior in a given situation, so A great example of this is if we are wanting to get better sleep, right? We've already visited this. If we're wanting to get better sleep, and traditionally we kind of maybe stay up late and we play video games right before bed, we're not getting a good sleep, right? So we're having these thoughts about not getting good sleep. We're not really happy about that. And our emotions, maybe we're stressed about not getting good sleep, we're more anxious, all of those kind of things. If we're able to change our behavior, right? Maybe we set up a better bedtime routine. We're able to get better sleep, so we're starting to have more positive thoughts about sleep, so we get better quality sleep, and our emotions and mood improves because of it. So you can see we can actually implement change around this model and influence the other variables within it. The only one that's really difficult to change is emotion. We've kind of talked about this before, and we chatted about it in the last one, is it's challenging to just turn off emotion. So sometimes it can be easier to target things like behavior, or in what we're going to talk about today, thoughts. So we're going to spend a minute just kind of talking about some of the thoughts that we have. And we have these things that are called automatic thoughts, and they are exactly that. They're automatic. We often don't have very much control over them. They just pop into our head out of the blue. And this actually serves an evolutionary advantage for us. And these automatic thoughts are actually there to keep us safe, right? So in a situation of danger, we need an automatic thought to pop into our head to say, hey, there's a bear, we need to get out of here, right? This is a dangerous situation, there's a bear right in there, we need to leave. And this thought pops into our head without us even thinking about it or without us trying to manifest this thought. It just pops in and we act accordingly. And we do so because we automatically believe this automatic thought, right? It wouldn't really be very helpful if we were in imminent danger, there's a bear right in front of us, and we have this thought pop into our head saying, there's a bear, you need to get out of here. And we sit there and say, well, hang on, is that really right? Right? In that case, that's not going to help us. We need to get out of there as fast as humanly possible. We need to believe the thought and act accordingly. The issue is that over time, right, we've generally, as a society, evolved into a spot where we're not in imminent danger most of the time, if not all of the time. But we still have these automatic thoughts that pop into our head, tell us some fact about our environment, and we believe it to be automatically true. It's pretty rare that we actually question these thoughts. These thoughts are often habitual and persistent, and they're unique to each one of us, dependent on our own experiences. They play an important role in our emotional well-being because if we're often having a certain type of automatic thought, right? Say we're having a lot of automatic thoughts that tell us that maybe the world's dangerous, right? That's going to make us on edge quite often, right? If we believe that the world isn't a safe place and our thoughts are automatically telling us that that's the case and we are believing it, we're going to have increased anxiety and tension and frustration, right? So it can directly impact our mood. The same way that we talked about having overcooked broccoli and it resulting in maybe that feeling of disgust, the exact same case is it made for just about every other thought that we have. And these automatic thoughts tend, unfortunately, to be more negative, right? And we tend to have them a lot more if we're feeling anxious or sad or angry. We tend to have more of these automatic thoughts just pop into our head. So let's chat about those in light of depression and anxiety. So if we take a look at this cognitive behavioral model in the realm of depression, so we have our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors. So we're going to talk about these thoughts. So in this situation, we're going to talk about getting passed over for a promotion at work. So your thoughts, if you're feeling and experiencing depression at that point in time, might be things like, I'm useless, or I'm never going to get ahead. And I'm sure if you're sitting there and you're thinking about what that would feel like to you if you actually had these thoughts, how that would feel, right? It feels pretty sad, right? You can feel that depression and that hopelessness that goes along with it. And so if we're feeling this hopelessness and this depression, I'm sure you can kind of feel that you're not really going to be inclined to do very much on the behavior side of things, right? So you're not going to be very productive. You're maybe going to just stay at home. And because of that, right, that really feeds into those initial thoughts of I'm never going to get ahead, right? I'm not even leaving the house. I'm never going to get ahead. And this continues, right? We still feel bad about that. Because we feel bad, we don't make any kind of changes, and that just feeds this thought process over and over and over again. In terms of taking a look at this from maybe an anxiety perspective, the thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that go along with that. Let's say you're an anxious individual and you have to go to your partner's office party, okay? Some initial thoughts that come up if you're an anxious individual might be things like, I can't cope, I can't do this, right? It's going to be too much, or it's going to be painful, right? Especially if you don't like crowds, you don't like people, this is going to be painful. We're not going to enjoy this. So you can imagine if you're going into a situation, right, regardless of whether you're anxious as a person or not, if you're going into a situation that you're thinking, I'm not going to like doing this, I don't want to be here, right? How does that feel in your body, right? You're being forced into the situation that you don't want to be in, right? You're going to feel uncomfortable, right? Anxious, scared. And because you're feeling anxious and scared, if you're feeling anxious and scared at a social event, what do you think you would be inclined to do? Do you think you'd be inclined to go and socialize with others, or do you think maybe you'd want to kind of stay away from them? In the most cases we'll see is that people stay away, right? If they're anxious and they're uncomfortable, they're not really willing to go and interact and socialize and put themselves out there. So in this case, we'll see somebody that maybe just goes and spends a bunch of time in a room by themselves, right? They'll avoid eye contact, avoid engaging. And all that does is it perpetuates that initial thought, right? We're kind of just fulfilling this initial prophecy of, I can't do this, I can't cope, this is going to be awful. Well, understandably, if you're uncomfortable at a party and choosing to be there alone, it is uncomfortable, right? And you're probably not enjoying it. And this perpetuates this cycle again and again and again. And so really it boils down to our own life experiences, right? The way that we interpret these thoughts, the way that we see the world around us comes from our own experiences. So in this, I'd like to encourage you to think about the last time you experienced kind of a bigger emotion, right? Whatever the larger emotion was, and we can talk about this from, maybe some of the bigger, harder emotions, like maybe last time you were really sad or anxious or angry. We can also talk about it from a side of joy, maybe last time you were really happy about something. And I want you just to think about that situation that it occurred in, right? What was going on? Who were you with? What was happening? Or what did happen and how? And now this is the tricky part, especially looking back in time. What were some of the thoughts that were maybe going on in your mind at that point in time that were kind of contributing to some of that feeling that you were having, whether it was a positive or negative feeling? Right? So if it was a positive one, maybe you were thinking, oh my goodness, I'm so excited I get to go and do this. Or I finally realized this goal, right? Or maybe if it was, something that was sad, it was maybe something a bit self-depreciating, right? I'm now good at this, I'm never going to get better at this. Those kind of thoughts. Or anxious, right? This isn't going to work out. This is going to be an issue. This is going to be a problem. Right? So really just trying to think about what was going through your head while you were experiencing this big emotion in this situation. And then really taking a moment to think about how that emotion felt at that point in time. So we did some work in the last session of noticing how these different emotions show up for you. At this point in time, whatever that emotion was, how did it physically feel in your body? Where did you feel it? Sometimes, right, different emotions present in different areas, right? Like when I get angry, it's here, right? It's my forearms and my fists, right? But when I'm sad, I can feel it right here on my chest. It's heavy. When I'm excited, it seems to come from like inside me here, right? It's this life that comes up inside of me. And that's me. That might not be you. So think about it for a minute and see where that emotion was for you in your body. And after you were feeling and experiencing all of this, what did you do? What behavior did you actually physically do after feeling that emotion? Was it something that you were excited to go and do? Was it something that you felt like you needed to do? Right? So if we're feeling that joy and that excitement, maybe you're motivated to go do something. Alternately, right, if we're feeling anxious, was there a possibility that we backed out of whatever it was? Did we avoid something? Right? Were we nervous about a conversation? Did we maybe not have it? If we were sad, right? What did we do after that? Did we maybe go home? Did we spend some time by ourselves? Taking a look at kind of how these were all connected in just this last time that you experienced this big emotion. And all I want you to do is just notice that there was basically a sequence of events here, right? There was a situation that happened. We had a thought about this given situation. We had an emotion that went along with it. And then we had a behavior that came out the end. I just want you to kind of take a look at that whole path, that whole sequence of events, being able to look back on it now, and just noticing that. And so we're going to practice going through a couple of thinking about what somebody might be thinking, given that there's a situation and an emotion that goes along with it. Because we're usually pretty good at pinpointing the emotion, right? Oh, I was so scared, I was so anxious, I was so happy, right? We usually remember those. It's a lot harder to pinpoint the thought that made it the case, right? Because we have different ways that we can interpret things. So in this situation here, we have a situation where your partner changed the oil in your car. And when they came home, they said, you said you'd take care of it 2 weeks ago, so I did it myself. And the emotion that this person is feeling is irritated, angry, and disappointed. So knowing that we have the situation and the emotion, what do you think might have been the thought that they were having in between there? And so some of the examples that people have come up with are things like, my partner doesn't think I'm good enough, right? They just did it themselves. They don't think I can handle it. They didn't think I could do it. Or things like, no matter how hard I try, they're never going to be happy with me, right? Those are some really challenging thoughts that can come in very quickly and automatically and make us feel this angry, irritated, or disappointed. And these are by no means exclusive. There are likely some other thoughts that may have come in that may have contributed to this as well. So if you have something that's slightly different than this, that's okay too. Now let's try another one, and this one's a little bit tricky. So the situation in this case is this person received a compliment at work from their supervisor. However, their emotion was anxious and scared. What do you think their thought might have been in the middle? So this one's a bit trickier. And some of the examples that we've had people come up with are things like, well, maybe I'll make a mistake and get fired, right? So they've got this compliment, well, now they have to maintain it, right? So they don't want to make a mistake and have it go downhill. Or they'll never be able to keep a job, right? So again, that added pressure of, well, they got this compliment, well, who knows when they're going to get that next one, right? And so in this case, that might have seemed disconnected to you, right? You might have been saying, well, it was a good thing they got a compliment at work, right? It's a good thing. They should be feeling positive. And this example really illustrates the fact that it really comes down to everyone's individual perception of an event. And it also showcases the fact that somebody's thought in the middle here might not be 100% correct. So some more unhelpful thinking patterns, and we're just going to take a look at some of these to see if any of these kind of flag for you, if you maybe fall into one of these categories, just so you're able to start looking for these in your own life. So we're going to first of all talk about the worrier's self-talk, okay? And this is a tendency to overestimate the amount of threat or the danger of a given situation and underestimate your own ability to manage that threat. So the big one is things like, I'm in danger right now, okay? This is the worst thing that's going to happen, right? Or imagining the worst thing that's going to happen, right? You have a work meeting, oh, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to get fired, okay? That you feel like you need to anticipate everything that could go wrong, right? So you're trying to protect yourself and you're worried about everything, so you feel like you need to anticipate every possible outcome so that you can manage all of these possible outcomes. these people tend to worry what if a lot. What if this doesn't go well? What if it doesn't go smoothly? What if this happens? Or things like, what will people think? Or what if I can't handle it? Okay? And again, these are often thoughts that will come up, and they'll come up again and again and again. Like we mentioned, a lot of the times these thoughts tend to be more negative, and they tend to come up more often when we are experiencing times of anger or anxiety or frustration or sadness. So another type of unhelpful thinking pattern that we'll see is the self-critic self-talk. And this tends to be where we evaluate oneself and our own future very poorly, right? So we're kind of being very self-depreciating when we are engaging in self-critic self-talk. So I'm not good at this, I'm never going to succeed, I'm stupid, if I don't do it exactly right, that means I failed, right? Really being incredibly hard on ourselves and not allowing for any of that good or that positivity to come through. Then we have the victim self-talk. And this is the feeling that we underestimate our own ability and that our condition is not going to change. Basically, that we're pretty helpless. And because we feel helpless, this is often associated with depression. So it's a lot of the statements that I'll never be able to do this, right? If we're helpless, I'll never be able to change this. This will never change or get better. I can't do something. What's the point in trying? Or it's too late to do that now, right? A lot of these kind of big, definitive statements. It's never, I can't, right? Not even leaving the door open a little bit for a chance in these situations. And then the final style of thinking pattern that we'll talk about here is that perfectionistic self-talk. And this is where we'll see things like efforts are never good enough, right? There's always something more we could be doing or should be doing. And so in this case, we have exactly that, a lot of those should statements, right? I should be doing more. I have to make this perfect. I must be excellent, right? Making sure that we are constantly trying to achieve more and more and more. And that self-worth really comes from these external sources, right? They're not coming from within. We're not happy with our own work. It's coming from that praise or money or status that's coming from outside of us. So, as we went through all of those, if any of those are ringing true to you, of thinking, oh gee, this is often how I'm thinking, I just want you to make note of that. Again, we need to know where we are so we know where we need to go, okay? And this will give you a really good starting point of maybe taking a look at some of these thoughts that we maybe need to start working with because they might not be serving you very well. Some other patterns that we see, so not specific to a type of person, whether it's a perfectionistic person or anything like that, but more just kind of general thinking patterns that we'll see are things like catastrophizing, right? So predicting that the worst will happen basically all of the time, right? Somebody's, a family member isn't home, well, they must have gotten into a car accident, right? They're a few minutes late, well, they definitely were in a car accident on their way home. Realistically, they probably just hit a couple extra red lights. Emotional reasoning. So this is the case that something feels like it's true because we have felt it, right? So this meeting that I'm in right now must be going badly because I am feeling anxious about it, right? Or that job interview. I don't think that job interview went very well because I was really anxious all the way through it, okay? It's often not the case, right? How many times are you able to look back at your life and think maybe something felt really scary at the time and you got through it and you thought afterwards, gee, I don't know why I needed to be so afraid of that. I didn't need to be that worried about it. That's often the case, right? We feel and believe that something is scary or dangerous or not going to work out because we physically feel it as an emotion. We have magnification or minimization, which is very similar to the mental filter, which is essentially you magnify negatives in yourself or others and minimize the positives. So this is kind of that pretty bleak outlook on the world, right? Similarly, with the mental filter, we exaggerate the negatives and minimize the positives, ignoring the whole picture, Okay? So essentially we're just putting a filter up. We're only letting in the bad information. We're neglecting to notice the good stuff. This can be where somebody gives you, your boss gives you 3 different compliments at work and then says, oh, but by the way, I actually need you to fix this one thing on this document. You're going to pay attention to that one thing and ignore the other compliments that you got, right? Oh, my boss didn't like this one thing. I'm going to get fired. Or, oh, I'm not good at this job because I have to fix this one thing. Okay? And again, the point of going through these is just to take notice if these are some thinking patterns that maybe happen regularly for you as a point of reference for what we maybe need to work on. There's also black and white thinking. So this is that things are entirely good or entirely bad and that there's no in between. Okay? Often things are pretty much in the gray, right? There's usually some good and some bad to everything. Black and white thinking, it's all good or it's all bad, right? I'm either excellent at my job or I'm terrible at my job. Realistically, most people are probably in the middle somewhere, okay? Mind reading, so assuming that we know what other people are thinking. This one's really common for people that say your colleague passes you in the hall and they don't smile or wave at you as they walk by. The automatic thought can be, oh, they're mad at me, right? Oh, they're mad at me, or they must be upset with me, right? Because they didn't smile or wave. We are actually very terrible at reading other people's minds. And I'm sure you've had your own experience where somebody has tried to tell you what you've been thinking or feeling, right? Maybe someone has said, oh, I can tell that you're upset today, right? Or something like that. And you're thinking, well, gee, I'm not actually upset. Or, oh, well, you didn't see me in the hallway, so I thought you were mad at me, right? And the odds are maybe you were thinking about something else. Maybe you were stressed about a meeting that you were going into and didn't even notice the person walk by, okay? We're actually very, very bad at reading other people's minds. So labeling, so putting a fixed global label on ourselves or others, like a very definitive, this often goes along with black and white thinking, this is all good or this is all bad. And overgeneralizing, so making a sweeping conclusion based on one situation. So say, as a kid, you had a piece of cake that was just awful. You absolutely hated it. Maybe it had cherries in it and you hated cherries. And instead of noticing that maybe it was the cherries that you didn't like in this cake, you've decided that all cakes are bad for forever, right? We're never trying another cake. That's a basic example of overgeneralization. Last 3 here are shoulds and musts, so that placing that unrealistic or perfectionistic tendency on what should be. So whether you should have done more or whether somebody else should have done more or ought to have done something different, okay? Personalization, so basically you're taking on anything bad that happens around you, okay? So your friend, trips and you think, oh, I should have caught her, right? That automatic thought of, oh, I should have done more, okay? It's your fault that they tripped. I should have been out there to protect them, okay? And lastly, the compare and despair. And this is where we see the good in others, but the worst in ourselves, right? Being that really tough self-critic. So as we're going through here, maybe take a couple minutes, maybe pause this and take a look at these last couple slides. Maybe just write down a couple that maybe stick out for you in terms of what you think might be a pattern in your own thinking. So once we have an understanding of these different types of unhelpful thinking patterns that we have, we can actually start to do something about it. So these automatic thoughts that pop into our mind, right? We're designed to believe that they're 100% true. In most cases, though, it's pretty rare that any thought is 100% true. More often than not, it's not entirely false, not entirely true, it's somewhere in the middle. It's that gray area. And so what we need to do is we need to start challenging these automatic thoughts when they come up. And there's different ways that we can do that. So first of all, we're going to take a look at just the facts. And this can be really helpful if you have kind of an automatic thought that pops up that's making you upset, or if you have one recently that's maybe been popping up, or as we went through the last few slides, there's one that popped up for you. So a really great way is just maybe write that thought down, okay? So now that you've maybe identified a couple of patterns of unhelpful thinking that you might be engaging in, we're going to talk a little bit more about what we can do with them. So if you remember, we talked about these automatic thoughts, right? They pop in our head and we're meant to believe them. So right now when these thoughts pop in, they feel like they're 100% true. They're absolutely right, which can be really hard when we're having some of these big negative thoughts like, I'm not good at this, I may be bad at my job, right? These types of thoughts, if they're 100% true, that's a really hard thought to have. And understandably, it can impact our mood and our behavior. What we can do is we can start to actively challenge these thoughts when they come up. So as an example here, let's say we have someone named Sam and they make a mistake at work. And this mistake results in Sam thinking, I'm bad at my job, okay? This is the automatic thought that pops into their head. And what we can do is we can actually work through and maybe challenge this. So you can reflect on this yourself. If you had this thought that I'm bad at my job because I made this mistake, we're going to take a look first at all the things that make this thought true, right? That's usually the easiest one because we are currently designed to believe that these automatic thoughts are true when they pop into our head. So in Sam's case, Sam might be thinking, well, I made this mistake at work, so I'm clearly not good at my job, right? Maybe the mistake got caught by somebody, right? So somebody else saw their error. Maybe this wasn't the first time that they made this mistake, right? So there's maybe a few facts that are leading up to making this thought true, right? These thoughts tend to not be 100% false either. There's probably some truth to them. But that being said, we need to take a look at the other side as well. We need to make sure that we're doing an appropriate evaluation of both sides to see if this thought is true or if maybe there's a better one that we can bring in that can replace it. So if we're essentially to just play devil's advocate here and take the thought of I'm not good at my job, and we're going to take a look at the other side and say, what are all of the things here that make this thought not true? So from Sam's perspective, they might be able to identify, well, maybe I'm good at some parts of my job, right? Maybe I'm really good at this other thing, but maybe not so good at this. However, sometimes because we're designed to believe that these automatic thoughts are true, it can be really hard to play that devil's advocate, to find the weakness in the argument for that thought. So sometimes it can be really helpful to take a look at if you had a friend that approached you with the same thought, what would you tell them? So if you had a friend that came up to you and said, oh, I made a mistake at work today, I am terrible at my job, what would you say to basically help them feel better in that moment? What would you say, especially if you know this friend, you know that they're probably actually reasonable at their job, right? They still have it, so obviously they're doing something right somewhere. What would you be able to say to them, right? So in this case, things that come to mind, at least for me, are, well, you made a mistake, right? Everybody makes mistakes time to time, okay? Or, okay, maybe you're not so good at this one area, so maybe you just need more practice doing that one thing, but overall, you're pretty good at your job, right? Maybe bringing in some examples that you've heard of from their lives over the last little while. And this can be really helpful when we're reflecting on our own thoughts, right? So if you were the friend evaluating your own thoughts, what would you say to yourself to really illustrate the fact that maybe this thought isn't 100% true? So in this case, right, we have some facts for, right? We made this mistake. Maybe we got in trouble for it. Maybe we've made this mistake before, right? All of these things saying I'm not good at my job. But on the other hand, maybe we have some other factors. We have things like, well, I'm good at other parts of my job. I made one mistake. That doesn't mean that I'm bad at my job. Maybe I just need some more practice in this one area, right? Looking at other explanations for what could result in this mistake as opposed to just being bad at my job. So we can then take this and say, well, hang on a second, maybe there's a more appropriate thought here. Maybe there's something that fits in better. So instead of saying I'm bad at my job, maybe the thought is, okay, I made this mistake, I need some more practice in this area, but overall, I'm doing good at my job. Right? Even just having that statement, that thought instead, not only gives us a path forward, right? We're able to actually improve and get better and are able to better assist those around us by getting better at our jobs. But also, we're taking away a lot of that negativity that initial thought held. And with that, we're actually able to reduce the distress that goes along with it, right? If you think about having that thought of, well, I need to get a bit better at this, but I'm actually pretty good at the rest of my job, there's not a lot of distress that goes into that. So we'll see decreased variations in mood and better coping strategies that we're able to do behaviorally moving forward. So in this exercise, I'm going to get you just to get comfortable right where you are. And it's helpful if you're able to close your eyes just so you're better able to go through this visualization exercise. And I want you, once you're comfortable and your eyes are closed, to bring to mind a secure container, okay? And it could be in the room that you're currently in, or it could be in another secure location. It can be anywhere that you want, and this container can be any shape, size, absolutely anything at all. I've had people use safes. I've had people use things like locked up books, like a diary. You can imagine things like a recycling bin or a garbage bin, anything that you feel like might be able to be secured for you. And this container is going to be strong enough to store all of these difficult thoughts and feelings and worries, and it's going to be able to keep them all locked up basically until you are ready to deal with them. So, what would this container need to look like for you in order to securely hold all of these difficult thoughts and emotions? You have free rein to make and design and change this container as much as you need so that it is going to be as secure as possible. And once you have an idea of maybe what that container looks like, I want you to just hold it in your mind and really look at it. So first of all, explore what color or colors this container is. Take a look at the texture of the container. Does it feel soft, smooth? Is it bumpy? Is it metallic? Does the container have a sheen to it? What's it made of? How big is it? And really take particular time to look at what makes this container safe. What about it makes it secure? Does it have a lock? Does it have a code? How do you open this container? Do you need to add some more locks or ropes or anything like that to it to make it feel more secure to begin with? As you do, just picture all of it. If it has a lock, what type of lock is it? Does it have a big key? What does the key look like? Is it a padlock? Does it have a code? If it's an electric lock, what do the actual lights and buttons look like on that lock? Now I want you to imagine opening up this container. Just taking a look inside. What does it look inside? Does it have a different color inside? Does it have a different texture? How big is it inside? And now I want you to picture taking these difficult thoughts and worries and feelings and putting them into this container. I want you to physically see them in there. So if there's a way that you can visualize these different thoughts or worries or emotions, if there's a particular person that's making you anxious, you put the whole person in there. If it's your work, you could put the whole building in there. Okay? Taking a moment to really visualize putting each of these thoughts or worries or feelings into this container. Spend just a minute putting them in, seeing them in there, knowing that they are in there. And once they're all in there, I want you to close the container in any way that it closes. Watch yourself closing it, whether it has a lid, whether it has a door. However it is that you close this container, watch yourself closing it and sealing in those difficult feelings and thoughts and emotions and worries. And now that they're in there, I want you to lock it or secure this container in any way that you need to. Taking notice, does the original lock that you put on there, does that feel secure enough to keep everything in there that needs to be in there? Do we need to add some more? Again, you have free rein to add as much as you need to this to make this container as secure as possible. Is there anything else, now that it's closed and we're outside of this container, is there anything else that you maybe feel needs to go in it? Is there something that's still lingering? Now that we've removed kind of maybe some of the bigger ones, is there anything else that you feel like needs to go into this container? If so, I want you to unlock this container, open it up, and again, picture putting in whatever that difficult thought, feeling, or emotion is into this container. Any sounds that go along with what you're worried about, any physical sensations that go along with this difficult thought. If there's a smell, if there's a sound, if there's a touch, all of it goes into this container. And again, we want to picture it in there. Knowing now that we've got everything out that we need, we're going to close it up again. We've done it once. I want you to close, seal it up, close the door, put the lid on, seal all of the locks. Add whatever you need to make it feel secure. Is there anything else that needs to make this more secure? Does it need to go somewhere else? This storage container? Does it need to go into a locked room? Does it need to go into its own safe? Is it maybe best that it stays in the room with you so you know that it's locked? Whatever you need to feel the most secure, that all of these difficult thoughts and feelings and emotions and everything that go along with them, that you are going to be safe from them. You can do anything that you want with this box. And know that it's here for you. So at any time, if anything else comes up that's really challenging that you're not able to cope with at that point in time, know that you can revisit this container. You can add anything to it that you need, and you can seal it back up again and leave it there for the time being. You can come back to it whenever you're ready, and that might not be until you go through it with somebody else, and that is okay. Just take one more look around. Make sure it's secure. Make sure if it's in a locked room or if it's in somewhere else that place is secure. And then whenever you're ready, I'll get you to open your eyes and come back here. I just want you to notice for a minute if there are any changes in how you're feeling by putting away those thoughts and feelings. Sometimes this is a skill that takes practice, and it might not feel like it made a big difference for you right now, and that's okay. I would encourage you to stick with it and try it a few more times, because again, this is one of those new things that our brain just needs to adapt to. Otherwise, though, you might be feeling a little bit lighter. You might be having a better sense of clarity so that you're able to pay attention to the things that you're wanting to right now. This is a really great one if you tend to worry before bed, right? When our mind is kind of the most quiet, it's not uncommon for it to run at that point in time. So if you need before bed, put things away. Put things in the container. Let them go be there while you sleep, and you can revisit them in the morning. And so as we wrap up today, again, I just want you to take stock as to whether there was an, oh, that's me moment as we went through today's session. And if there's one area that you're able to focus on moving forward, right? Whether it's that you're going to start maybe taking a look at some of these automatic thoughts that are popping up to you and maybe trying to challenge some of the easier ones that do. Know that it's a bumpy process. We're not designed to challenge these automatic thoughts. We have evolved over years and years and years to automatically believe these thoughts. So know that it's something that's going to feel a little bit weird. But again, with time and with that neuroplasticity, we're going to be able to make these new paths. We're going to be able to create better, more adaptive thoughts for ourselves that are going to let us live less stressful lives. We're going to be able to engage in things in the way that we're choosing to, as opposed to the way our brain is automatically telling us to. And so with that, I hope you're able to continue practicing these skills. I again encourage you to take part in our skills group so that you're able to continue practicing these and get further clarity on any of these if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'll chat with you again soon. Thanks.